Okay, we have other things to work on also today, so let's move forward. Next thing is status report update on the unmanned aerial system community meetings and review of timeline goals. I guess I'll put that on the agenda for me to start the conversation. Or did you have stuff to say?
No, I put this on the agenda. Put this on the agenda for the following reason. In March, we have the San Jose Police Department coming back with their series of recommendations to the Commission. Shortly after that, about a week later, they'll be going forward to the Public Safety Committee of the Council with the same recommendations. One of the things that I wanted the Commission to feel comfortable with and start discussing was, as you've been listening to the public comments, as you've been looking at what the police department has put in front of you in terms of early recommendations on what they want to do regarding a UAS. You need to start thinking about what it is that your reaction is up to this point and how it's going to result in a recommendation to the mayor and council. One of the things this commission has done in the past is it has put a lot of time and effort into developing recommendations along with budget, and you're still going to be doing that. But you've also put in an enormous amount of time in special meetings and public hearings and discussion among yourselves and the community in relation to the potential use of a UAS in the city of San Jose. So after all this, that was started back in November of 2014, you're now on a path that leads you to do one of three things. One is to listen to all the input and to formulate your own recommendations side by side with the police department in relation to what you think potential use or not of a UAS in the city of San Jose should look like. Second thing is that you can listen to the police department as they lay out their recommendations to you in March and say, we think these are the right way to go and we support these. The final thing you can do is make no recommendation at all. So these are the options that you have in front of you, and after all this enormous amount of work that you've put into this on weekends and special meetings in public hearings, you're now at the stage where you should begin discussing among yourselves what you plan on doing or what you want to do for the March meeting. So this is the discussion that you ought to be having around the table this evening. It doesn't mean that you need to come up with any recommendations tonight. It just simply means that you ought to be giving some reaction and thought to what you've heard so far and see the direction that you may be going in. That's point number one. Point number two is that the timeline is going to be fairly swift once you hit the March 11th meeting. The police department is starting to put together some draft recommendations that you'll be seeing at the March meeting. And then they have the option at the March meeting to take some input from the commission, certainly, and then maybe modify what they have as they go to the Public Safety Committee. And then eventually it goes to the mayor and council. So one of the reasons the commission was made a permanent commission and focused on one of four areas, including public safety, was to be able to give the mayor and council some feedback from the point of view of the neighborhoods. Not only do you represent the neighborhoods, but you've been listening to the residents in all these different meetings. So you haven't gone through a very thoughtful process. You have one more public meeting this coming Saturday in the east side of San Jose. The original meeting back in November that you had this preliminary discussion on, you had about 60 people in the audience, excluding yourselves. The meeting you had on December 6th, you had about 120 people that came to do public testimony. The meeting at the West Valley branch of the library, you had about 45 people that showed up that Saturday in District 1. And I can't tell you how many people might be coming to the meeting this coming Saturday. But you're heading on about 200 plus folks that have had some kind of comment. You had a wide variety of media that has been paying attention to this discussion. And you've had a variety of different organizations that have made public testimony. So this section of the agenda this evening is really to start the discussion among yourselves as to what is it you want to do. So that's the background as to where you are right now. So Mr. Chair, you can lead the discussion.
So I was going to say some observations is that I don't think we want to decide anything until we get the last bit of public comment. And on the other hand, we have a fair amount of stuff now, so we start thinking the process. We have, I went through and reread all the notes. You've been taking a survey also. Is your survey complete? You want to talk about your survey?
No. So there's a survey and there's about 700 responses. And as indicated when we first began this journey, it seems best to provide the results of the survey after all the public meetings have been held. And so that would be after February 14th. That's my thinking. But my comment on what we're doing is we've invested a lot, and we talked about at the beginning of this term the fact that we should produce a product. And so I personally think that we should develop a recommendation, that it should be the neighborhood's commission recommendation, whatever that recommendation is, that it should stand apart from a police department recommendation or a city council subcommittee recommendation. And I have formed some opinions, but I will withhold those until after the February 14th meeting.
So I think we should write our own letter, and I think a lot of it we can start writing some of it beforehand too, documenting the process that we've gone through. Documenting the process, how many people, we've had the final number at the end, but we can start discussing what we've heard. We can start tabulating some of the stuff. We can update the numbers at the end. We have a section at the end where we say this is what we recommend, which we will discuss next month, but we can start working on this thing beforehand. This is where I'm leading up on this thing. Other comments?
Yes. I just checked in. The recommendations from the police department presented December 6th.
Is that what this one is?
I think so.
Yeah, that hasn't changed. I've barely gotten a copy of the draft recommendations, which I'm not sharing yet because they're not a public document.
Right.
What you have to work with, I thought might be helpful as you think about what you're doing towards March is what the police had put forward, and I'm assuming that at the meeting this coming Saturday, none of that will have changed. I mean, so the same document will be moving forward for public discussion until they're ready to formulate their recommendations.
And the point I was going to make is that this at least is a starting point, and some comments about what we like about it, what could be changed, and how it might fit the use by the police department and the community.
Yeah, I think that a very valid format for the result that we produce is that can be driven by what I was hearing from a lot of the community at these meetings. Is you can say that the specific proposed use that the police department is saying right now, in general, people are okay with that. And some of the biggest concerns that were raised were, how do you prevent mission creep, and how do you review to prevent mission creep. And, you know, it would be very legitimate for us to say that, you know, what the police say here is good, but these are the concerns that we heard from the neighborhoods and from the people who came to the meetings. And here's some suggestions for how to address that.
That is what I was thinking also, it's a continuum of what they're asking for, what people are worried about, and where do you draw a line between it, and can we draw a very bright line and make it obvious? And,
Yeah, I
wanted to
was
say something.
using this, and it's kind of, in my mind, I was gonna make up like a matrix with left-hand column, all these items, and another column of whether they met that criteria, either in the meetings that we had and what kind of response. Like, for example, UAS would not be flown over crowds unless it's moving to money issues. That's come up at every meeting, and there's been discussion with the people in attendance, and was that satisfied? Was that issue addressed and satisfied? Kind of make an evaluation of each one of these items that they were addressed. People in attendance at the meetings had satisfactory answers to all of these things.
And then they talk about a pilot program and coming back for comment, and I think we should formalize that. And the question is, do we ask them to have a one-year pilot program, come back and report, and then move on, in which case it might be a 3-month gap in this process, or do we ask for to give a pilot response, have there be a one-year pilot program, but we get feedback after 9 months so that they can continue on with a revised thing. So how do you feel about 9 months versus a year?
Well, a year is what they proposed, correct?
It's a pilot program, but then we
Correct.
stop everything for 3 months while we proceed.
Well, independent of that, we could make a recommendation that in 25, 50 words or less, or 250 words, that every quarter they drop a few statistics and information and update on what they're learning, what they find, to help bring the community along with some kind of metric to say, if this is what you put on the table, how is it working? And what are the benefits and the takeaways? And it doesn't have to be long and complicated, but it's something to inform us and help us inform the community.
To us here at the Neighborhoods Commission.
I beg your pardon?
Have them report to us in the Neighborhoods Commission?
Or
report
to the public.
city.
Or to the council, or all.
As long as it gets out to one, it gets out to
Moses?
everybody.
Well, I think I heard
I can't hear you.
I heard what they said the last time they were here, that they said that it's not a program designed by the police department, but that the community is supposed to design the program for them. So I think when we're looking at rules, regulations, laws, that's important also, because we don't want to just give them an open blank thing, going out and doing what you want to do.
Right.
And then you're going to find out that that opens the Pandora's box to more things. If you compare the drones that the military use compared to what they were looking, these are toys. They're not up to speed at all on what the drone is all about. I was looking at a program on the drones through the military, and they were having a problems where the enemy were canceling out all the signals of the drones that were sending out, and this is one of the issues. So they can mimic the signals, cancel them and delete them, so it becomes of no use. So I think there's a lot more that you have to look at, that not to just give them a blank check. And we need to be in somewhat control of that too.
So I was asking them at the first one about encryption of the signal, and they're saying that they didn't need to do it, or the one that they bought didn't have it. Is that something we would recommend, or is that something we would require of them? I was talking to my son, who said that up in Berkeley they had a drone race the other day, and they had a whole bunch of drones flying around.
Prize is selling these.
And the one that won wasn't the fastest, but it had some software that drove all the others into the wall. It took them over and then crashed into the wall, so it just followed behind through the wreckage,
Well,
okay? Because they didn't bother to disable the Bluetooth interface or something like
What
that.
do they
One took over the
need?
others.
Do they need a
Um,
year?
And they talk about, we asked about one person, I remember one person in the public asked would the video be publicized, and they said no. They learned after the Munich massacre and the Olympics that the bad guys were watching the video and knew where everything was. Well, if the signal is not encrypted, then the bad guys will be sitting there monitoring where it's going here too.
Or,
This is
or,
Silicon
or
Valley. We
somebody
have-
can install some machine type of unit and cancel out their signal, so it becomes of no
Jamming,
use at all.
But do we require this of them, or they're just asking how to use the thing, this is what they have?
That concerned me. The other thing that concerned me was, and it came up, is their collection of metrics and what's the pilot program going to do. It came up at one of the meetings, and I didn't follow up too much with it, but at the end of a year or 9 months, they're going to come up and they're going to say, well, here was the usage, and if they didn't have any bomb threats or something like that, there's not going to be any reports, because they were going to use this in conjunction. But my point is, for training, they ought to have some kind of a training scenario where they go through a training using a drone and a training using their normal methodology, and you've got some comparison that you could say that, gather some metrics in that.
They were talking
I just didn't have a good feeling about
Well,
the
yeah,
metrics.
they said that they put theirs through a training school, which the military does too. They're all pilots that go through that
Yeah.
training.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a scenario where they do their training for bomb disposal or bomb identification, however they respond to a bomb threat.
Know what you're
Okay,
talking about.
with a drone and
Yeah.
without the drone, and have a comparison that,
Yeah,
it was effective, it
Yeah.
wasn't effective, you're in a
That's
building,
my
or,
concern,
whether
too.
you're in a lot, or,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So now you got something to compare it against.
well, sure.
So they already have a little robot, and they're probably practiced with it
Exactly.
periodically. So
Exactly.
then
That's
put
my-
the little bomb on top
right.
of the table and see how the robot responds.
Or see how the drone,
How the
you know,
drone
so now
works.
you got a scenario, you got 1 or 2 or 3.
And they can
different-
do it in the police training area or a fire training, there's a fire training station area they can practice
Yeah,
in.
and they do training with the robot. So,
So that would be good metrics
right.
to see how did it work on that. Robert?
Yes, Robert Sandoval. The question was asked to them in about 2 or 3 of the meetings, because a lot of other people were new there. How many bomb threats do they get per week?
Right.
They said 2 per week. How many do they get per month? They said about 12. How many do you get per year?
I remember the 110.
110. And the concerns that I have are, and they were very to the point that they would only be used for that reason on the bomb threats, nowhere else. And the concern I have is the safety of the officers if they're answering to a bomb threat. So a life is a lot more valuable than a drone.
So I don't think there's any concern about them losing the drone or damage to the drone in case of a bomb. I don't think that's the concern. I think the public's concern is that they're going to be using it. Oh, it's also good for riot control. Oh, it's also good for seeing who is outside marching and taking pictures of the stuff. And now we have a video of everybody that was protesting in favor of one thing or another. So that's what the concern is, and that's so far away from what they're agreeing to. They say not going to take any video, not going to use it only in these
Right.
circumstances.
Right.
But I'm afraid of drawing the line so close to. But if they say they're only going to use it for bomb disposal, we draw the line right at the bomb disposal, and then they need it for an active shooter or a suicide jumper or something like that. Well, if you draw the line a little more reasonable, we might be able to accommodate that. Juan?
So I worry that we're setting a dangerous precedent, and what that is there's a process that was outlined that we all took pride in, and this could be a national model for engaging the community. And one of the questions that the police department asked is, does the community want us to use this, yes or no? And then what we said is, give us a proposed policy, something to talk about, and they came up with it. And yet, we are having a discussion about proceeding before we've heard from the community on February 14th. Not to sound harsh, but we may as well cancel that meeting because we're already, okay, so I want to strongly encourage everyone to, I'm okay with outlining a process. This is gonna happen, and then we're gonna draft a recommendation, and we don't have to get into the details of the recommendation now. I know we've all heard from over a few hundred citizens, and I know that I've seen results of a survey, and I'm not sharing that yet, because I don't want to taint a process, and I don't want to discount the opinions of the people who will come to the February 14th meeting, and I don't want to ruin a great process that we set up. So I appreciate everybody's opinion. I may share some of your opinions. I just think that we should wait until after February 14th to start discussing whether we support or not and the details of it. That's my personal opinion. So I will withhold my opinion to date because who knows, it could change.
And I respect that, and I didn't mean to give the final answer now. I guess I was trying to indicate a range so we'd figure out where the line would go. I was trying to indicate that I think there's kind of a range, a trade space, and we're trying to figure out where to draw the line. And I do want to hear on February 14th, to get all the public comment there. I have reviewed the comment that we've gotten from the last 3 months, and I do see kind of a pattern. I want to see that this confirms or changes that pattern, and then we'll have the discussion next month, and I think it'll be the whole, practically the entire meeting. Oh, there's a discussion about vendors too, and
Yeah, there's, because of the gravity of what you're going to be listening to and the amount of time that you put into this, it's only going to be, at least my recommendation at this point, that there's 2 items. The first item, which will not take an enormous amount of time, is the one the folks were here about earlier, which has to do with the city passing peddler regulations about a year ago. And they're revisiting that right now, and Sacred Heart and some of these other organizations are looking to provide some input. So I understand that there's some neighborhood groups that are looking for this item to be brought before the commission to provide some other input. That's not an enormous, it's really the beginning of a process, so that'll be on the agenda. The majority of the rest of the agenda, given the fact as to how the interest is in this particular subject area the commission's taking on, will be the UAS recommendations from PD. Because you'll see those for the first time. You'll be able to react to them. I'm not suggesting under any circumstance that you have your own recommendations ready that day. It's really just about the process. The discussion tonight is, has the process worked for you so far? Doesn't take away from the meeting on Saturday because you haven't gathered all the information. But this is a learning experience for the commission and having done this amount of outreach and it's a model you're developing, so it's good to revisit it and see if this has been successful for you so far.
And to be of any value to the city council, when do they decide these things?
I don't believe they're going to decide it immediately. The step after this, and it was laid out in the presentation you've seen several times
sometime in April, wasn't it?
It'll go to Public Safety Committee the following week.
March 19th, according to that.
So, commission should probably be present there, the chair or somebody else, in case there's questions that come up about what the commission's been doing in relation to this. But as far as agendize it for any further council consideration, that hasn't been determined yet. So public safety will have a better sense once there's a reaction there from some of the council members as to where this goes in what timeline. So I don't have an answer for you yet.
So recognizing that short time after March 11th before March 19th, and also recognizing that people like to leave at 9 o'clock. I was trying to get some stuff that we could, next month, we're gonna have a lot of discussion next month. I was trying to see what we could do now to start the process. So let's see, Moses, then Matt, then you, okay.
In our meeting that we had at the library, I don't remember, second district, I guess, there was a question asked, because they're using the, I think it's called a Pro type camera.
GoPro.
GoPro.
Yeah.
Well, that GoPro cannot be used in the evening at nighttime. So everything's in real time, but they can't erase it. I mean, nothing's can be used, it's all erased. So now, let's say we have a problem with bombers that, like Boston bomber, that person did that, and you need all that information to be given to the FBI. They have no information to give them because it's all erased. But I believe that that's going to change. So we're looking at the preliminaries, the basics today. But I think that that's going to change as we go along.
Which is
So
going to
we-
happen at the end of the pilot program, so for the first,
So we need
9
to
months or a year.
look to see what they are going to make as recommendations, but they have to address us with that.
Okay, my question is, at least partly what you asked about the timeline on things, because given the short amount of time between our meeting and the Public Safety Commission or committee's meeting, we have a couple of potential options if we wanted something written in the meantime. One is literally to craft our language in the meeting and then tell poor Ernest to go and write it down, or to very quickly form a subcommittee with the direction to write it down. And this is all process. But this is something we faced in the past where we got to something we said, how quickly can we get this done? And it's going to be another month or another 2 months. And
so I was hoping from this discussion that we might have a ad hoc subcommittee that would meet sometime after last of February 12th, but before our meeting, to come up with a draft comment. I was hoping to get the survey, could the survey be done after February 12th, but 14th, after February 14th, but before the next meeting, could we have it then?
Yes, I think I sent an email indicating that the goal would be by February 25th, but that could be moved up as necessary. But since you asked me a question, let me point out the police department made it very clear that this was just a suggested guideline for a timeline, and that I don't think that it would be inappropriate for the commission to say 1 week is not sufficient. Police department, let's please extend it a little so that we don't have this time crunch.
But it was a city council agenda. It wasn't the police driving that agenda. It's the city's subcommittee.
And Peter, jump in here. In a couple of weeks ago, each of the committees published their work plan. And in that work plan, if you look at that, in the work plan for the Committee for Public Safety, this is agendized as an item. It is on the agenda. Beyond that, I don't see it anyplace else. I think it's up to public safety and the council to agree when it's going to go forward, if it's going to go forward, however that happens. But it is definitely in that date of March to be heard by the Public Safety Committee. So that's as far as council has dedicated an agenda time for it to be discussed.
So let me just say one other thing. So it looks like they proceeded with a suggestion from the police department, and I know that the police department erred in listing that the Neighbors Commission would provide a recommendation to the subcommittee when we will in fact draft a recommendation if we decide to and submit it to the city council. So our deadline is not, what is it, March 11th?
No, that's when our meeting is.
When our meeting is.
Right, what I'm saying though is March 19th. our deadline is not March 19th.
Our deadline is March 11th.
Yeah.
You know,
We'll go to council.
the timeline is a timeline that was set in motion to go ahead and agendize discussion. On March 11th, this commission will be hearing back from the San Jose Police Department regarding their recommendations. You have not agendized it for you to create a recommendation that date. You're going to listen to their recommendation, and then you can either take action that evening, defer action, set up a different date that you'd like to follow up with the recommendation. You haven't put anything in an agenda yet. It's just the date at which PD will be coming back. So, public safety, they have a date at which their recommendations that came before this commission will be also heard before public safety. Whether or not the commission has a recommendation that goes along with that doesn't really go to public safety, it would go to the mayor and council. So that's all moving at this point then.
But if we are behind schedule, then public safety, that is, well, that's 5 council members, right?
Correct.
5 council members, so they would have had one side and not heard anything from us for weeks, months, and then it goes before council, they've already heard it. So I think we do need to be at the same time. Well, Jared, you have a question?
Well, yeah, like I said, I'd like to volunteer. Let me produce this matrix that I just said and give it to Ernest.
Speak in the mic.
I was going to produce the matrix and get it out through Ernest, just so that we got this go through here and everybody can kind of get focused on what we're looking at and have that as kind of a tool. One of the concerns I have is if on the 11th, if we see their recommendations for the first time, I'd like to see their recommendations before the meeting, maybe on a Monday or something like that, so that we don't come to the meeting cold and we're seeing that for the first time. Is there any way you can have that happen?
Yeah, a lot of times what happens is presentations are given to staff the day of. If I'm going to post the agenda, usually it's posted sunshine a week beforehand. So if it's available in draft form, I'll have to check with the attorney's office and with the police department. But I can send it as an attachment so that you have it as a public document.
I guess my concern is that I wouldn't want to have on March 11th be put in front of me a 50-page report that I got to look at. I mean, that's a worst case scenario. You see where I'm coming from? And once again, if we do some preliminary work on these specific points and kind of get our thoughts focused, we can do some correlation with that report that you.
So I just want to toss out a few other questions that we should be thinking of also is not only how the thing is used, but who uses it. I mean, is it, who runs the thing? Is that out there all the time? Or is it only under the control of one officer or his delegate? Does it get lent out to other departments? I mean, if the fire department needs it, do they get their own? Does the fire department have to then go through the entire same process? Would we review the use of the fire departments? Or are we just looking at only the police department and code enforcement can go get their own and do whatever they want to with it? I think there's a lot, that's another question that I think we need to address.
So the thing I wanted to emphasize in terms of, this gets presented to the Public Safety Committee. Typically, at that point, the committee can either recommend a staff action, come back with a report to us or a recommendation to us, but also any council member at that point can write a memo and submit it to the Rules Committee, and the council could go barreling ahead with an action without us prepared to make our recommendations. So it's important to be ready once we have our data gathered, so after this Saturday, to put our thoughts down.
What I'll do, just to, because this is a new process all the way around, is I'll check with, on the timeline, before the next meeting to see what the reaction time is. It's not unreasonable that if you see it for the first time at the meeting, that you have time to react to it. It's just timing that is also going to go, that same report's going to go forward to public safety a week later. So I don't think that there's an urgency that is mandating that council is immediately going to take action 2 weeks later. I think this is such a sensitive action that, per Matt's point, a lot of times staff will be directed to come back with some kind of analysis, this, that, and everything else. I think the key thing for you is that if and when this goes forward to the mayor and council for discussion, that's where the commission's recommendations really come into play, not at public safety, but really what you recommend to the mayor and council. When it's agendized for discussion, you'll have plenty of time to do that.
So we don't have to get everything done by the end of March. We have April meeting also. Don't we also have budgets that we're going to spend a lot of time on? Or what's our work plan look like?
Yeah, you've got a lot of things that are going to be bunching up here too, so we haven't got to that discussion yet.
Okay, David.
This issue of the drone generates 1,000 questions for every simple point they're trying to make. Radio frequencies, keeping the film, and by the time they answer those even start to answer those questions, another 1,000 questions come up because the technology has changed. It's changing faster than you can get to your car. My point is very simple. They've come to us with a toy for a purpose. And in a sense, they proposed that it be nothing more than a camera on a stick, except it's not connected to the stick. And the stick is only so long, it can only fly so high, and it can only be so far from people and the problem that it's trying to view. If we view this thing in that scope and respond to their trying to put it in that context and do it in a way that meets the community sense of confidence and trust, then I think we've got something to work with. As long as we keep a body of questions about code enforcement and fire and checking on crowds and everything else, it'll never get answered. So we need to constrain the context of any comments we're going to make, the vision that we'd like to see it approved or disapproved within. Hate to kill it because it might be used over, an unrealistic situation. And I'd hate to see it approved if it isn't properly defined and constrained.
Because they did bring up active shooter as one of the uses.
Correct.
Active shooter, hostage situation, and the bomb. Those are the three explosives, emergency situation, active shooter, hostage, barricade situation.
And
that was the.
Sure. And we might ask a question. Under bomb, what would be the context of its use? For an active shooter, what would be the context of its use? If they can take a policy to the council or to the safety committee with our input, that puts it in a box and allows it to be used for a year so they can learn and gather some skills and trust, that might be of value. But to debate it for a year or to kill it because we can't debate might be a little awkward.
Also, at the end of that pilot project, like, it's not a viable thing and it goes away. But,
right.
So it can go either way.
So now we're deciding without hearing the last week's.
No, we're not deciding. I'm just saying, if we can keep the context and all of the questions and the input, kind of focus it down the funnel so that when the community speaks and we've heard the police, seen the police proposal, that
So
we're ready to do
I'm happy
something.
with it being small like that, but I want to make sure that they don't also say and other people can use it. So.
They already said no.
They've already said no, so.
We can put the limiters on there.
Exactly.
So, Mr. Chair, one of the reasons I wanted to have this item, as you can see, is you spend 20 minutes, 25 minutes going back and forth just, on the parameters of what the discussion should be. That's what March's meeting is going to look like. I'll also have you bear in mind that you've done at least 3 meetings that have gathered enormous public input. That day, you're probably going to have a lot of people out here wanting to do public input also. The priorities for you to discuss it. You can, to a certain point, I think, limit the public input to a minute per person or whatever, so that you have a chance to have this thoughtful discussion you're having right now. The priority is for you to come up with the recommendations, not to keep gathering more public input. So just so you're aware of that, because as you can see, among yourselves, you're having a very vibrant discussion. And you still have questions that you want to grapple with before you get to the survey results and the final input that's coming in on Saturday. So just be aware, that's why I think the bulk of your meeting that March 11th is going to be on this topic. Having said that,
Yeah, time is running out. So I'd like to have an ad hoc subcommittee, and I was kind of hoping maybe 3, 4, or 5 of you might volunteer to meet sometime after the 25th. Is that? So if we meet sometime after the 25th and before the 11th, we can come up with a straw man draft that folds in what we have from the police department, what we've heard from all the public, start the conversation, and then present it. We would send a rough draft amongst yourselves, edit once, send it to Ernest to distribute, so we'd have a document to start reading is what I'm hoping for.
I like that idea.
You want to make a motion, somebody make a motion for that, or is that how we do that? Move for an ad hoc committee?
I make a motion that we form an ad hoc committee regarding the San Jose Police Department's unmanned aerial system.
Yeah, system. I keep on saying area surveillance.
That to draft a recommendation sometime after February 14th, but before March 11th.
Okay, and discussion. Just call for a vote. Okay, to have that, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we get a committee, who would like to be on the committee? I was hoping Juan. Dave, you want to be on it? Gary? Oh, Norma, okay. So then I guess I'll have to ask Ernest to give me the email addresses of every of these so we can coordinate the time and place. And this is not a quorum, so the Brown Act does not apply, correct? So we can meet over coffee someplace and just.
this is an ad hoc committee, so it doesn't even actually need to be noticed.
Excellent. Okay, now you want to leave by 9 o'clock, and we want to get.
Yeah.
So everybody knows that there is this meeting on, where the date go? February, Valentine's Day, yes.
Chair, I think Ed wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, Ed.
Ed Rest. I think Ernest had a very good point, and that is that basically this is a good procedure to go through so that when you handle complex issues in the future, so you might want to consider the idea of documenting the procedure so you have it procedurally set up to do the same thing again and again on complicated issues. David had a good point, and the good point was trying to put it in a box. One of the things that I would take a look at is taking a look at things like they will not have the following capabilities. In other words, if what's on this piece of paper changes, then rather than going back to, as it says, the San Jose Police Department went back before elected officials, anything on this paper changes, basically you ought to come back to the neighborhood commission. Whether that's after the fact because it's an emergency, or before the fact when they decide they want to put an imaging machine on or something else, or some other sort of thing on it. The other thing is, if you look at GoPro cameras themselves, they've got the ability to record on an SD card. I've got one. It's Wi-Fi, you can break in and get it. And also the camera itself has a SD card. You can, once you receive the Wi-Fi signal to, you record it there. So you either record it on the camera itself, or take the Wi-Fi and record it on your computer or your smartphone. So that's another issue that you look at. So let's see, the last one is, when you look at the recommendations, I would make it so that, as David said, you box them in. So anything that goes outside the box, so to speak, they come back to you. Because my experience in Sunshine is if you don't, when you make your recommendations, it's not very well defined and boxed in, it will be misinterpreted in the future, and you go, well, that's not what we thought it meant, or that's not what we said it meant, but they're gonna look at the paper and go, well, wait a minute, you never put that down. You need to put it down. Thanks.
I have a very ancillary issue. We're beyond drones. And this is just to get the feel for the commissioners in this room who may have received letters from the water district. It's on the water district's letterhead, but they are from private insurance companies trying to encourage you to get sewer and septic tank insurance. And in District 2, we have had a multitude of questions and concerns and people saying this is a ripoff. I called an insurance agent yesterday who says that he believes it is a ripoff to the residents. And I just want to know if any of you have been receiving these letters, because I'm not going to, we don't have septic tanks in District 2. And I do believe it is a mechanism whereby people or roofs, where people are paying for these insurance through fear tactics and thinking that maybe their sewer is going to start backing up. And I just wanted to get some real quick comments on this so I can send out a big email blast for next door.
Yes, I've gotten a bunch of those.
I have to
Throw 'em away.
Throw 'em away.
Things about it for the water main coming in without the
Yeah,
septic
so,
tank.
and it's the San Jose Water Company, which is a private company.
And this is through Great Oaks now. And I know we are responsible for the meter, from the meter on the street up to our house. But this is one that's talking about the sewer system itself, which I don't believe should be our issue as homeowners.